What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our SEC football channel. I'm going to reveal the NCAA Football 2003 bracket for the SEC as part of our GOAT tournament, the greatest of all time, where we are going to determine the greatest program in the history of NCAA football, the video game. If you're not familiar with this series, we did a video on this series on our main channel on the SG1 Sports College Football channel, and you can also read about it on the website at sg1sports.com. All the information that you need to know is there, and this is part of the Sim Pick Challenge. If you have not signed up for that, please sign up for that. We'll get to that in just a second, but let's first get to the bracket here. This is NCAA Football 2003, the 2002 college football season, and this is based off of the team ratings on the game. So not necessarily how the teams finished the season, but how they were rated on NCAA Football 2003. You look at that, and this is how the bracket comes out. And in just a second, I'm going to run through the team, show you the top players, quarterbacks, running backs for each of these teams, so you can kind of just be familiar with who is on the roster and how good these teams are if you're going to fill out a bracket as part of the Sim Pick Challenge. But in the West, you've got LSU as the #1 seed. They will play the winner of Ole Miss and Arkansas. Ole Miss will have home field advantage. Eli Manning, the quarterback for Ole Miss. Texas A&M will host Mississippi State. And you're wondering, well, look, Texas A&M, they were not in the SEC in 2002. Well, we're putting the teams in their current conferences because you want an even playing field. There's going to be a point system, and Texas A&M wouldn't be able to get any points in the SEC if they were in the Big 12 tournament. So that's why I'm putting all the teams in their current conferences. That way, it's the same tournament or not the same tournament, but the same teams in each tournament each year. So Texas A&M at #3, the 3 seed, will host Mississippi State. Auburn, how about this? The Iron Bowl in the first round. Auburn, the 2 seed, will host Alabama. Of course, this is long before the Nick Saban era at Alabama. They're actually the bottom team, the worst rated team in the SEC West. We go to the East now. This is a loaded division. Tennessee, the #1 team in this on this side of the bracket. South Carolina, #4. Missouri, #5. So again, Missouri was in the Big 12 this year, but they will be in our SEC tournament here in this one. So South Carolina will host Missouri. Should be an interesting matchup there. Georgia will host Kentucky, and then Florida will host Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, the bottom team in this Eastern Division. I'm telling you, Tennessee, Florida, and Georgia all were really good back then, and that is going to be a fun division. And I'll talk more about that as we get into showing you the rosters, or at least the top players for each of these teams. So this is it. This is the bracket. It'll begin on Friday, and the games will be on. So for we've got the whole schedule mapped out on the website if you want to go check it out. But the way it's going to work for the SEC in particular, the games for the SEC will all be at 6 o'clock Eastern time. Every game in the SEC will be at 6 o'clock Eastern time on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. So the first game will be this Friday. We will kick things off this Friday with the first game of our SEC GOAT tournament on NCAA Football 2003. Ole Miss and Arkansas will kick things off. So you've got to get your bracket filled out before that game kicks off on Friday. You got a couple of days to do it. This one's actually already been on the website for a while, so some of you have maybe already filled out the bracket. But if you want to do the Sim Pick Challenge, if you're going to be part of that, you want to try to make sure you get all your picks in, because if you forget to make picks for one tournament, that could cost you, and ultimately could cost you that $100 prize. So let me just go through the Sim Pick Challenge really quickly. We did a video on this over on the main channel. If you want to go watch that, also you can read about this on the website. The Sim Pick Challenge is just an opportunity for you to make predictions on our simulations across all of our YouTube channels. It could be single game picks, it could be tournaments like this, and this will last over the next several months. There'll be a point system, and we'll keep up with it, have a leaderboard, and at the end of this thing, the winner will receive a $100 prize. So if you want to play, just go sign up at sg1sports.com. Just look for the Sim Pick Challenge. It's there on the homepage, or I'll probably have a link in the description of this video. Make sure you go sign up there, then fill out your brackets. And good luck to you, because it's going to be very tough, I think, to make predictions. You never know what you're going to get on these video games, but hopefully it'll be a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. So now, to help you out with your picks, we're going to now go through some of the top players from each team in the SEC on NCAA Football 2003, and then maybe just give you a little bit better idea of which teams were the best, and also just reminisce a little bit on some of the players from back in the 2002 college football season. All right, we're going to start with Alabama. We'll go in alphabetical order here. Alabama, a B on this game. And we're not going to go through, and if you watch the ACC video, I'm not going to show you all the teams and their ratings. I'll just tell you what their rating was. Alabama B, not ranked on this game. You see their top players, Jarrett Johnson at defensive tackle, Moorhead, right defensive end. Not a ton of talent here. And this is before Alabama, of course, before Nick Saban, before Alabama was what they are now. It's kind of crazy to see. Quarterback Brody Kroll, Tyler Watts on this roster as well. And they actually have Brody Kroll rated higher. I'm not sure who the starter is. Because Tyler Watts, the senior, I'm pretty sure would have been the starter that year. And then at running back, you had Ahmad Galloway, Santonio Beard. Remember Shad Williams, Ken Darby. I remember all of these players for Alabama. We'll look at the receivers. Antonio Carter, Zach Fletcher, Sam Collins. So there you go. Those are the top players for Alabama. And we're going to go again in alphabetical order. So the next team will be Arkansas. Arkansas, a B on this game as well. A B, not ranked on the game. Their top player is an offensive lineman. As you take a look at some of their top players, Cedric Cobbs is a really good running back. Fred Talley was really good as well. Arkansas had some great running backs in this era. You go past that to Darren McFadden, Felix Jones as well. They've had some good ones. Matt Jones, the starting quarterback here, just a sophomore, maybe before he really became, a superstar type player. There's Cobbs, there's Talley. Also had Brandon Holmes. Let's continue on now with the Auburn Tigers. They will be next. Damon Duval, the kicker, a 95 overall. He was the highest rated player on this game. I will never forget his game-winning field goal kick against Florida in the rain when they were number one. You got Terrius Thomas, linebacker, Carnell Williams. Everybody remembers Cadillac, and Ronnie Brown. So some really good players here on this roster. Just a couple years before their undefeated season. So Daniel Cobb will actually be your starting quarterback. Jason Campbell, I believe, started that season. I think he started all year that year, pretty much. But Daniel Cobb on the game will be the starter. Carnell Williams and Ronnie Brown, of course, one of the better running back duos in the history, I think, of college football. Auburn, I just skipped over this. They're a B+. They are a B+. That's their rating on the game. And they were ranked number 25 in the preseason. So a B+ ranked number 25. They were, again, the second highest team in the West. Let's continue on now to the Florida Gators. Florida was really good in this era. Rex Grossman, their top player at quarterback, a 98 overall. You had Taylor Jacobs at wide receiver, Todd Johnson, Aaron Walker, Ian Scott, Ernest Graham at running back. That was his senior season. Max Starks. This was a really good roster here for Florida. Of course, they were number 2 in the East, and their overall rating on the game, an A-, and they were ranked number 6 in the country. So they're talking about one of the top teams here in the Florida Gators. Rex Grossman showed him at quarterback, showed Ernest Graham there at running back. Also had Willie Green. I remember Deshaun Wynn. I remember Seatric Faison as well. And if you watch our ACC video, that was the first one we did. I didn't know a ton of players from this was a long time ago. I couldn't remember a lot of them, but I do remember a lot of these SEC players just because I followed the SEC closer back then. Now I try to follow all the conferences pretty evenly, but back in my younger days, just as a fan, of course, I followed the SEC a lot closer. Let's move on now to Georgia. So Florida was an A-. Georgia is a B+. They're a B+, and they were ranked number 13 on the game. B+, number 13 on the game. A couple of offensive linemen right up there at the top. Boss Bailey, Bruce Thornton, Fred Gibson, a wide receiver. Also had Terrence Edwards, had a really nice combo there with those two wide receivers. Quarterback was David Green. I think a lot of people will remember him. And we probably remember DJ Shockley as well. Two very talented quarterbacks. Shockley didn't have a lot of time to play there at Georgia, but he was a good one. Musa Smith, their top running back. I don't really remember any of these backups. Musa Smith was the starting running back here on this team. Let's go now to Kentucky. Kentucky, a C+. A C+. Now, they were not rated very high on this game. How about Jared Lorenzen, though? I'm sure you remember him. The hefty lefty there. He was an 86 overall. You had Derek Abney, really good wide receiver. Artus Penner. This team was pretty talented. I'm surprised that there's Shane Boyd. I remember him actually playing as well. I guess it's just top to bottom. You know, offensive line, things like that really hurt their rating. That's why they're only a C+. But skill position, this Kentucky team was pretty good. You had Lorenzen there at quarterback, Artus Penner at running back, and like I said, Derek Abney there at wide receiver. I guess they just needed a little bit more talent, maybe on the lines. I don't know, but they're only a C+ on this game, despite having some really exciting playmakers there, and of course Jared Lorenzen at quarterback. Let's go to LSU, the number 1 seed in the West. They were a B+ on the game, ranked number 15 in the preseason. So this will probably be the favorite in the West. They had Brandon Tofield, a 94 overall wide receiver. Brady James. How about Michael Clayton? He was really, really good. So you see a lot of talent here on this LSU roster. Quarterback was Matt Mock. I think a lot of people probably remember him. There's Marcus Randall. He had some playing time after this as well. And Brandon Tofield, not just Tofield, they had Dominic Davis, Joseph Adai, Justin Vincent. Wow, this was a loaded backfield. Unbelievable. I mean, they had so much talent at that running back spot. So a really talented LSU team. They are, again, B+. Let's go now to Mississippi State. They are next up. And here we go. Mississippi State. Mississippi State was a B on the game, not ranked. You see Dante Walker at running back, their top player. Mario Hagan, Justin Griffin, Corey Banks. So some really talented players here. Are not a bad Mississippi State team. They're actually, well, they were number 6 in the West on our bracket. But Kevin Fant was the quarterback for this team. I remember Kyle York as well for Mississippi State, and just showed you Dante Walker. How about Jarius Norwood as a freshman? He went on to have a really good career there at Mississippi State. Let's go now to our next team. It's going to be Missouri, of course, not in the SEC at this time, but we're putting all the teams in their current conferences. Missouri was a B-, and was not ranked on the game. They were the number 5 seed in the East. There is Justin Gage, really talented wide receiver. Let's see. Brad Smith's quarterback. I think a lot of people probably remember him. This is his freshman season. He was already in the 80s, and 81 overall. That's a pretty high rating for a freshman. He did have a phenomenal career there at Missouri. And Zach Abram there at running back. Let's look at. I knew they had Gage. They're probably the only wide receiver that I really remember. But it's fun to just kind of reminisce and look back on these rosters, even if we weren't doing this series. It's just kind of neat to look back. We go to Ole Miss now. They were a B, and they were ranked number 23. So this team was ranked, and they were a B overall. Going to be led by Eli Manning at quarterback. How about Doug Ziegler, tight end? He was really good. Eli Manning, I just mentioned. Eddie Strong at linebacker. Ronald McClendon, talented running back. This could be a good team. Tough team to beat, I think, in this tournament. Chris Collins at wide receiver. So there, again, is Eli Manning and Ronald McClendon. And I just don't have time. I mean, I would love to go through the entire rosters, but the video would be way too long. Our next team is South Carolina. They were a B, and they were number 20 overall. They were ranked. And you see three offensive linemen lead the way. No skill position players really here among their top players. Corey Jenkins was the quarterback. Ryan Brewer, the running back. And I don't really remember him. Troy Williamson, I think a lot of people would remember him. He was just a freshman in this season. So, yeah, South Carolina, don't really remember a lot of their players, honestly. We move on now to Tennessee. All right, they were number 4 in the country, ranked number 4, and they were an A-. They have a really good chance to get into the 8-team tournament, even if they don't win the SEC because they're ranked so high. But an A-, number 4 in the country, led by their kicker, Alex Walls. They had Kelly Washington, Jabari Greer. Remember him, Casey Clausen. How about Jason Witten at tight end, longtime Dallas Cowboy, and Cedric Houston at running back. This team was loaded. Casey Clausen there again in 89. Cedric Houston and Jabari Davis as well. I remember Gerald Riggs. Tennessee, this was back when they had some really good teams. CJ Phaeton there. It's going to be, I'm telling you what, this conference here in that East with Tennessee, Florida, and Georgia, that is going to be an interesting battle. And I'm not saying that it'll be one of those 3 teams. Maybe it won't be. But if you just go back to these rosters, those were some really talented rosters. Texas A&M, of course, also not in the SEC during this season, but they were a B and number 22 overall. As you take a look at their top players, let's see who their quarterback was. It was Mark Ferris. Maybe slightly remember him. I remember Reggie McNeil more. And at running back, Derek Farmer, I do remember him. He was really good. So that's the Texas A&M top players. Let's go to Vanderbilt now, the final team in the SEC. They were a C+. They're not the most talented team. Vandy was led by Dan Stryker, wide receiver. Only 2 players over 80 on this roster. And, of course, they were the bottom team in the East. As we look at some of their top players. Benji Walker at quarterback, I do remember him. But check out Jay Cutler as a redshirt freshman. His rating was not very high at this time. But, of course, we all know what he turned into. Still a young player at this time. At running back, Norval McKenzie, I do remember him. And then, again, Stryker there at wide receiver. So, that's it for Vanderbilt. Those are all the teams in the SEC. Again, the East definitely looks better than the West. You've got some good teams in the West: LSU, Ole Miss, Auburn. Alabama was the bottom team in the West, but they had some pretty good players as well. But that East with Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida is going to be really interesting, really competitive. If it may not come down to those teams, but maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. That I think is going to be really intriguing because I think if you're filling out a bracket in the East or for this SEC bracket, I think you could go with any of those teams, Tennessee, Georgia, or Florida in the East, and I think it would be a good pick because all 3 of those teams are really good. But there you go. Those are the rosters for the SEC teams, the top players, quarterbacks, and running backs here on NCAA Football 2003.